Tonight is the third webinar in the Ayurvedic Professionals Association webinar series, lockdown webinar series. We've had Patrick Holford. That was a really good one. People loved that. And we had Eduardo, and that was good. We've got lots coming up for you. So the first one we've got on the 27th of March. Thomas, do you remember who this is?
Yes, Marianne Teitelbaum on Ayurveda and thyroid conditions. So
okay, that's going to be good. And Colette's watching here, whether she wants to run away or not, because Thomas and Colette are going to be hosting that one, unless Colette runs off. Yeah. And then on the 15th of April, we've got Robert Verkerk in conversation with Dr. Vijay Murthy. On the 21st of April, we've got a bit of a new one. We've got an interactive webinar with Annie, who's joined us tonight. So watch out for that one because you're all going to love it, because Annie is going to ask you to go and pick some herbs, and we're going to do some herb testing on Zoom. So that should be a first for everybody. May, it looks like we've got Sebastian Pole of Pucker. We're just tying him down to a date, so watch out for that one. I think someone's got their mic turned, they've turned it off. So if you've just joined, I'll say it again, please mics off, screens on, because it's just nice to see everybody. If you've got any questions, the chat box there, put them in the chat box. Colette is going to be monitoring that, and Carolina. So what's the time now? We're 5 minutes past. So I think I'm going to dive in there and introduce tonight's, if you're all ready. And everybody here okay? Hello, Vijay. All here? That's good. So tonight, the webinar is from Thomas Mueller. Full disclosure here, Thomas is one of my teachers. It's amazing that we're still friends, because I must have been the worst person he ever had to teach for any sort of therapy. Thomas can stand there in a suit and do a massage. I know, because I have been there with him while he's done it. I can wear, well, I should wear painting gear, because I get in such a mess that Thomas and I always laugh about it afterwards. How on earth did you get in such a mess? But I do, anyway. Thomas has been practicing Ayurveda for over 30 years. I know he looks too young for those of you that can just see Thomas in his red there, but he has. He started working with the Maharishi organization, and he was teaching, and he was opening Panchakarma clinics all over the world. So really what he doesn't know about Panchakarma and therapies, it's not worth knowing. He was my teacher, as I said, at the Faculty of Ayurveda for World Park College, New Zealand. We became friends after a bit of a spat, and we still have our spats, but we still make up. So he's been in London for over 10 years now, I think, might be 11, time flies, and he's had a clinic here. Thomas has worked with celebrities that most of us would love to even just say hello to, like Deepak Chopra and Maya Tiwari. I always say her name wrong, even though I know her alongside Vijay and Thomas, who introduced me. And he also works, or he has a royal connection, but we won't say that here, because I think enough about the royals over the last couple of days. He's author of a book called The Natural Health Matrix, which I helped edit. And if you haven't got, I'm sure the link can go up in the chat box that you can have a look. So, Thomas, here we are tonight. There you are wearing your red, and you know, the title, Emotional Constipation and Mental Obesity. Yes. Well, in Ayurveda, we're used to talking about constipation maybe, but emotional constipation. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on what you mean by emotional constipation?
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you very much. And I'm really pleased to see everybody here. And yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have a chat with you about two which I believe are the real pandemics of the 21st century, dealing with emotional constipation and dealing with mental obesity. To answer your question, in the same way as we like to keep our physical body subtle and free from any toxins, we also need to look at our emotional body. We need to keep our emotional body flexible and pleasing to various experiences. And any sensations, for example, be it pleasure, pain, trauma, shock, they are all experienced, either experienced in the present or experienced in the past, are being stored in our emotional body. And I like to use that analogy, say it's like our emotional body is like a wireless automatic backup hardware of our computer. And dealing with sensory overload is really one of the key issues that I believe we face, especially in the 21st century during the times of the technology based age that we live in. So, for example, I think if I'm correctly remembering that when we look at the TV screen, basically, yes.
Can you turn your mic up a bit? Some people are finding it hard to listen or to hear. Is there any way of turning it up just a bit?
It's on full.
Okay, is that better, everybody? I don't know who said that, but let's carry on and see how it goes. Yep.
Okay, so what I was trying to say is that basically, did you actually know that 30 images pretty much per second are being transmitted while we watch TV? It's about 1,800 images per minute, and that makes about 108,000 flashing images for the mind to process within an hour. And with this sensory overload, the aim, when we basically think that we watch a movie and we try to relax and we try to go to sleep, we are constantly bombarded with the sensory overload, and that's what we take into our sleep. And in fact, as some research has been shown, is that basically for every hour of watching TV, we are at risk to reduce our lifespan for about 22 minutes, by about 22 minutes. So for every hour of watching TV, we give away 22 minutes of our life. I'm not sure if we can take these really at face value, but what I'm saying here is that we need to be able to process those experiences that are actually stored in our emotional body, not just in our emotional body. If you think about sensations, they are, and when I talk about sensations, could be sensations of pleasure, sensation of pain, even sensations of having sex, for example. They are stored in the limbic system of the brain, but also in our muscles, and they cause physical tension. They can cause a brain overload. They can cause difficulties to concentrate, and so on. And with emotional constipation, what I mean is, because of the sensory overload, when we don't have a means and way to actually neutralize or to process or to digest those sensory inputs, it is almost like imagine you're having a nail and you scratch a nail into a piece of rock. You just, besides of this horrible sound, it just leaves any marks in the rock for quite a while. And through processes such as meditation, breath work, and so on, I won't go too much into those yogic practices because I think most of us are familiar with it. This line, ideally, when we look at dealing with emotional constipation, should become just a line that is scratched in wood, or a line that is scratched in ground, in earth, in water, and eventually in air. But what we are doing is we are so busy dealing with everything that is being put upon us that we don't take the time to keep our emotional body subtle and flexible. And that leads to emotional constipation, which leads to a lot of complications. And I will talk about this as we go through the evening a little bit deeper. Does that answer the question, Sue? She has disappeared. Yeah.
No, I'm unmuting. I'm very conscious of the dogs wandering around, so I'm muting all the time. Okay, so yeah, I think it does answer the question. We'll see from the questions at the end if people have understood it. So that's emotional constipation. Okay, so mental obesity. Can you define that?
Yes, defining mental obesity, again, it feeds into an overload of the mind. And I use the term specifically obesity because a lot of, or very often, patients come to me and they ask, oh, I want to lose weight. And they expect me to come up with a nutritional regime, diets, lifestyle aspects. And then I pay very much attention to the state of their mind, because you cannot drop the physical weight if your mind is completely overloaded. So, and I will talk about a technique that I have been using and describing in my book, but using in my practice, which I call the obese technique, to deal actually with mental obesity, which is a very simple technique that anybody can use. And it's a 3-step process, and I will go through that. So on one side, emotional constipation, on the other side, mental obesity, are two factors that very much influence our physical well-being.
Okay, so you know, we've probably got a lot of mainstream Ayurvedic people on tonight. So this is probably not mainstream Ayurveda. So I'm going to ask you, where did this idea come from for you? Why have you gone in this direction?
That's an interesting question. My training has been in Ayurveda. I'm not trained, I don't claim to be trained in classical Ayurveda. I came into Ayurveda from the perspective of consciousness. So as I was working on some projects with Deepak Chopra over time, and also some other experts in the field of quantum healing, understanding our quantum mechanical body as a tool of well-being. Basically, I came through Ayurveda through the approach of consciousness, and my clinical practice has always been influenced by the approach of looking at consciousness. So, and why I came up with the concept of mental obesity and emotional constipation is looking and understanding the Pancha Mahabhutas, understanding the 5 elements of space, air, fire, water, and earth. So when I do a consultation, or when I have a discussion with somebody, I try to understand, where are they predominantly stuck, in which of those 5 elements, and those 5 elements are linked to the 5 bodies. So for example, the earth element, I correlate to the physical body, the water element to the emotional body, the fire element to the energetic body, and the air element to the mental body, and then space is linked to consciousness. So rather than just looking at the elements from the perspective of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, which I do, because I do traditional assessment methods of pulse diagnosis and tongue analysis, nail analysis. But in my mind, I try to understand which of those 5 elemental bodies is at lack, which of those bodies needs to be addressed. So for example, if somebody comes to me with any physical ailments, maybe feeling tired, fatigued, lack of energy, hormonal issues, yes, I will look at the physiological aspects of it from my understanding of how I analyze from an Ayurvedic perspective in the terms of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, then the metabolic types and the tissues or the tattoos. But at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, so that is manifesting in the physical body. But the underlying cause could be, for example, a lack of connection to higher self, which are linked to the consciousness aspect of that person, which is one of the subtler bodies. So, and interesting here is that very often through my clinical practice and through my experience, especially having worked and having been in London over 10 years now and seeing patients over a long period of time, I have noticed a pattern. I have noticed a pattern that there is a strong link between the mental body and the emotional body, and the mind and the emotions. And it is what I describe as the ping pong game between the mind and the emotions. So, for example, we may have some underlying fears that we are not dealing with or that we haven't dealt with. And those fears could be anything related to something that we consciously are aware of, or aspects that we may not be aware of. But those fears color the way we look at our environment, the way of how we perceive the world around us. So, for example, um, when we are mentally overactive, overly stimulated, then possibly some of those fears may be triggered. Yes. And let's say, for example, you wake up in the morning and the interaction goes both ways, from the mental body to the emotional body, but also from the emotional body to the mental body. Let's say, for example, you wake up in the morning and you don't feel very well. Okay. Somehow you don't feel well. You can't define it. And your mind goes, oh, maybe it is because I watched too much TV before I went to bed last night. So the emotion is fed back to the mind. And then the mind goes, you see, you didn't listen. And what that does is it makes us feel guilty. So the ping pong game goes back from the mind to the emotional body. We start to feel guilty. And then all of a sudden, the subconscious feeling could be stirred up and could come up and thinking, oh, I have been told that I shouldn't do that, but I have done that. And that actually worsens the way of how my mind responds to it. It gets me into a spin. So a little issue, for example, not feeling well, can escalate quite easily, quite quickly into something much more substantial. And my approach is by looking at mental obesity and looking at emotional constipation to cut this ping pong game between the mind and the emotions, to separate it, not to ignore it, but to understand one feeds into the other and one links with the other. So this is how I bring in the understanding of the 5 elements and the elemental bodies. And also what I notice is very often, depending on who sits in front of me, I can think as an Ayurvedic practitioner, oh, you should take Triphala, or you should do your Ayurvedic oil massage in the morning. You should have a very strict routine. You should stop drinking alcohol, stop smoking. That could be all my suggestions. But then the difficulties is the person who sits in front of me, is that person actually able to translate that into action? And I feel guilty there, because if I remember going back in the times when I did my Panchakarma technician course in 1988, 89, I felt so excited about Ayurveda and I wanted to convert everybody. Everybody needs to become vegetarian. Everybody needs to follow Vata Pitta Kapha diet and all of that. But actually I alienated not just my family, but my friends. And through those years of practicing, it's probably most of us who are practitioners, we find a way, a middle way of really looking at how we can convey the message. But by understanding the link to the 5 bodies, I can then assess, okay, this person might find it difficult to all of a sudden shift their main meal from lunch, from dinner to lunch, or I find it difficult for them to make physical changes, to put them on a detox program. But I will try to find an entry point, and that entry point could be through the emotional body. I could just simply suggest perhaps some breathing practices that gets them in touch with their emotional body. And by opening up their emotional body, they over time naturally feel inclined to actually make the changes that are required on a physical level. And the other way around. So I may not be able to teach them meditation, which I believe anybody who comes through my clinic at some point in time will learn a Vedic meditation practice, because I have practiced meditation for a very long time. And to be quite honest, it has kept my sanity and it has kept me in a fairly balanced state, I believe, where I am able to deal with mental obesity when my mind gets overly active. It is about clearing the mind through the process of meditation. So some people may not be able to sit still. I can't prescribe them to actually sit and do some meditation practice. But maybe the approach I take is by addressing and accessing the energetic body. Accessing the energetic body by raising the frequency of the body. And I use various quantum healing tool devices, quantum frequency devices, and I work with frequency medicine um, very specifically to do that. And by raising the frequency, all of a sudden their mind becomes more calm, the body naturally starts to detoxify, and they understand they are able to basically connect back again with the self, connect and activate their own self-repair mechanism. Because I believe, or my approach of clinical practice is, we have got all the tools that we need to heal. We just need to provide the environment. So long-winded answer to Sue's question, although I use Ayurveda in the back of my head, my clinical approach is very much influenced by Ayurveda, and I haven't learned anything but Ayurveda. But through my own personal journey, I have developed my own processes, my own techniques and tools and ways of how I utilizes this in my clinical practice. Does that make sense?
It does, because I know you, and I think we are going to get questions to see. I mean, I can personally testify, having sat next to Thomas in A&P lectures, the going into meditation, when he used to come out and say to me, "What are we doing now?" So I know he does go into his meditation when it's all becoming too much. So that just shows that he's been practicing his mental obesity technique for a long while. I remember it well. Thomas, can we go on to your book just briefly, please? Because people I know have been asking about your book. It's called The Natural Health Matrix. And editing your book, I remember one thing, you had something called the OBC technique, which we're hoping, if we've got time, we're going to do a little practical session at the end. But can you just do a brief rundown on what you mean by the OBC technique, please?
Yeah, one of the main tools to deal with mental obesity, besides, of course, um, meditation practices, the use of Ayurvedic herbs, and so on. But like I said, some people, especially those who come to me who have no idea what Ayurveda is, and who may feel initially they heard about Ayurveda and they believe that Ayurveda means basically I need to become vegetarian, or I need to do this, I need to change my lifestyle. I start off with the very basics, and that's the OBC technique. So dealing with mental obesity using the same, in quotation mark, approach. That's why the technique is called obese technique. The O stands for observe. I will explain that in a minute. The B stands for being, and the C stands for creating. So the first step to really change the weight, the load that we have on the mental level is to acknowledge what is really going on. And the O stands for observation. It stands for observing how I feel. So the link between the mind and the emotions again. How do I feel at this point in time? And I can very much relate to that. And I would love to bring this topic up here. So I'm going on a slight circle around, but trust me, I will it will all make sense in a couple of minutes. So what I was going to say is that very often, especially for me myself, I've lived in an ashram for 10 years. I can say that myself, being in a so-called spiritual environment, very often there is the inclination to spiritual bypassing. When I say spiritual bypassing means to ignore how we feel. Okay, I need to transcend my anger. I need to transcend my feeling of being frustrated or upset or tired or depressed even. So that's what is called emotional bypassing. And this might work for some people, but in my practice, looking back to my life and looking back to most of the people I deal with, and a lot of the people that I have been working with are very much in with 2 feet in life, what my mother would call as such, which basically means is they live life to the fullest. They drink, they smoke, they have got, before COVID, so we're talking pre-COVID times, they have had red carpets events every night. They are going here and there. So um, trying to explain to them some spiritual concepts might be very difficult, and they don't want to change their habits. But actually, by introducing the first step, which is the observer position, that means, for example, get them to understand how they feel. How do you feel right now at this point in time? And then that will allow the mind to actually open up to the possibility of understanding where this emotion actually comes from and acknowledging it without actually suppressing it. And suppression means basically that we just pretend something is not there, which is there. But the truth is, when it rains, like today in London, we cannot pretend the sun shines. When it rains, it rains. So we have to just accept that it rains. And that in itself, then use that as a springboard to change it, to transform it. So the first one is observe. And I will talk quickly through the technique, and we can do an exercise together at the end. So the first thing then I would ask them to do is just sit there. When you feel angry, in your mind, repeat, I, Thomaz, observe myself feeling angry. I feel upset, I feel depressed. And then use the breath to create space. When I mean that, simple breath work, breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 6. So by the time you breathe out for 6, your nervous system goes from fight and flight into rest and digest. So you create a possibility of accepting that frustration without causing the tension, being constantly in sympathetic mode, fight and flight mode, which we know from a more health, medical, physiological perspective is a cause of many of the ailments, underlying inflammatory processes, and so on. So constant exposure to stress, adrenal exhaustion, cortisol, excess cortisol in the body. So by actually acknowledging what's going on, using your breath, you give the space for things to shift. Yes. And this is why, and this might be slightly controversial, what I'm saying now, I don't believe positive thinking works. Because again, like I'm saying, if we pretend the sun shines when it rains, it doesn't make sense to me. We need to acknowledge that it rains. We need to acknowledge that we feel down, and then we can shift it. Because otherwise, we are bypassing some of the deeper fears and emotions that actually contribute to physical impairment and physical ailments in our body. So observe, number one. Number two, get into a state of being. What that means is I'm asking my patients or my clients that come to me to really, over time, add on to their emotional bank account positive experiences where they're able to tap into a state of being, where they feel at home with themselves, at peace with themselves. This could be walking in nature. It could be maybe walking on the street and just looking in the eyes of a child, an innocent child. It could be listening to some music. So anything that gets us into a space where we feel everything is all right. And we build that emotional bank account. And then once we have gone into a neutral space, then we are able to create what we actually want to create. And this is also how I work with people with addictions, how I work with people who have got habits that they want to shift and change. In addition to the Ayurvedic concept of changing habits slowly, but I use this process of, first of all, acknowledge, get into a neutral space, and then shift it. If we miss the middle part, if we try to go from, let's say, sixth gear into reverse gear, we will choke the engine, we won't get anywhere. We need to acknowledge what goes on. And having lived in an ashram again for a long time, basically, and I will talk about chakras and marmas shortly as well, briefly. It's very much about heart chakra upwards. So heart chakra, basically third eye, crown chakra, and difficulty to express where I was, and I'm just sharing this openly with me over time in the environment that I have been in. It was very much about, there was no space for free thinking. It was all about following another dogma. And it suited me, and I'm very grateful for the experience that I had because it shaped the way I am and the way I practice today, very much so. But what I've come to realize is if we bypass the lower energetic energy centers, if we bypass solar plexus, second chakra, root chakra, in particular, when we deal with emotional constipation, we need to look at the second chakra, which is our sexual chakra. And I will speak about that briefly in a minute. So that's the answer around the OBC technique, a very brief introduction on the process and how I incorporate it into my clinical practice.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we're getting some interesting comments in. People are agreeing with you that it's not a good idea just to try and pretend to be positive. And I know we're going to share the questions at the end. So Colette's getting ready for those. You've been mentioning chakra. So without me going on, I'm just going to let you know we're now at 22, Thomas. But if you could briefly kind of go on talking about the chakra work that you were just saying and why you think it gets stuck and where. And
okay, so before we go there, there's another thing that I would like to mention. I feel, especially when we look at well-being from a yoga perspective, when we look at health from a yoga perspective, very often we get stuck in the chakra systems. I'm moving away. I'm trying as much as possible to move away from the chakras because each time when we see a patient, when we see a client, and we tell them, oh, your root chakra is out of balance, or you're not grounded in yourself, your heart chakra is blocked. Actually, we keep them in the density of that energetic vortex system that is closely linked to our physical body. So if we understand chakras and looking at chakras and marmas, for those who may not know the difference, basically it's very clear. Marma points are junction points between consciousness and physiology. And these are points that have very specific structures. It's like ligaments, joints, bones, muscles, vessels, and so on, that basically can be located. They are not necessarily a particular point. So in my practice, I work with marma points. I do marma therapy, but I incorporate frequency medicine and gem therapy in conjunction with those marma points. But what I'm bringing here up is an understanding that although it is good to have a basic understanding or an understanding of the chakras, but each time we talk to somebody about a defect in a particular chakra, because we are working on an energetic level, because we are working on a consciousness level, we actually anchor that experience in the body of that person that we deal with. The way I work is, and it's also not so much anymore about bringing the energy in from the crown chakra. We have got all the potential by actually sitting in the heart chakra and working with the energy of the heart. And we know from an Ayurvedic perspective, the heart marma is one of the most delicate marmas that we have. And accessing the higher energetic bodies through the heart is what naturally clears the energetic pathways of the other chakras. So I just wanted to throw this in. Coming back again to an understanding of, or having said all that, I'm giving you what goes on in the back of my head when I understand and when I analyze somebody and try to understand, for example, why do they have addictions? Addictions are basically rooted in the second chakra. They are rooted in the second chakra. It's the sexual chakra, which basically is um, uh, and this leads us back again to the emotional constipation aspect. It's pretty much very often a taboo theme. We don't talk about sex, we don't talk about intimacy. And for those who are practicing, I'm sure you would agree with me, so many people, they have no relationship to themselves. We are being fed, again, mentally, totally overly stimulated through the media of what the image of a healthy body should look like. Size 8, I can't have this, I can't have that. And like I always say, from an Ayurvedic perspective, your journey starts by accepting that you are an apple tree. If you are an apple tree, you cannot pretend to become a banana tree, and you cannot become a banana tree. You can become the best blossoming apple tree, banana tree, but we cannot change from one to the other. In essence, we are our doshic, our constitutional makeup. So a lot of addictions basically sit in the second chakra, which means the inability to work with sexual energy in a productive, in a healthy way. And again, if you look at media, if you look at Netflix, really, if you click through Netflix, it's quite, in a way, it's quite shocking, because everything pretty much is geared towards sex and sexuality, and really sort of using that and keeping us in that dense way of being, rather than using the tantric approach of sexuality, where we work with the sexual energy and actually bringing those most important, those very powerful energy up through our body, which naturally starts to cleanse and clear various other energetic pathways. So fear of change is linked to the second chakra. Hormonal imbalances. Just let's look at how many people nowadays suffer from reproductive issues, reproductive health issues, male and female, infertility. So I truly believe this feeds into the impairments and imbalances that are very much linked to the second chakra, which is the sexual chakra, which has to do with intimacy and sensuality. And sometimes patients come to me and I may not give them anything other than asking them to start being creative again. When I ask them the question, so what would you really like to do? What does creative expression mean to you? Very often they look at me with big eyes and they say they are not creative. That's all um, BS. Basically, everybody is really creative. It is about unlocking and understanding, maybe for some people writing, maybe for some people art. And this is what gets us into our intuition. It gets us into our intuitive self, which really creates a harmonious balance between the second chakra, the first chakra, the second chakra, and the rest of the energetic chakras. And again, bringing my example, when I was living in the ashram, we did never talk about sex. I had to deal with my own sexual energy, and it was a totally taboo theme because sexuality prevents you from becoming enlightened. And I must admit, I believed it. For me, I believed it for many, many years. It was 10 years of my journey to understand that actually this might work for somebody who sits in the Himalayan mountains and works as a, or his dharma or her dharma is to be a monk, and that might work for them. But we are living in this three-dimensional dense world. It is about accepting the energy of Shiva and Shakti, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, but not abusing it, not using it for the purpose of destruction. Imagine if that energy is released and how it rejuvenates the body. And there are ample of research that actually back this idea up. And this is what I believe the concept of soma and from the Vedic scripture also takes comes in by actually utilizing these subtler energies and letting them circulate, percolate through the body and let the healing to occur. And that has led me over time to also my tantric journey to use tantra as a means for me to deal with those shadow aspects. So yeah.
Okay, Thomas, I know that time's pressing on, so I'm just going to kind of keep it going here, if you don't mind. Since I've known you, which must be, I don't know, 15, 16 years now,
Yeah.
I know you've really changed. Your approach has changed from that teacher that I had to now the person that has great interest in gemstones, like you say, shadow work, tantric. I know that you're a tantric teacher now, and I know you've gone on a journey to Peru. So I realize that you've got a lot of interesting things there. In 5 minutes, can you sum up some of those aspects, really? You know, the shadow work, Peru, ayahuasca, you really have brought a lot in the last few years. And I'd like people to get a flavor of that, if possible. Can you do that?
Wow, that's very challenging, but I will try. Um, wow, okay. So this might sound okay, he is deviating from Ayurveda. This might sound, what has this to do with Ayurveda? And please, I would like to mention again, I have come into Ayurveda from the perspective of consciousness and expansion of consciousness. In fact, the way of how I treat people nowadays, I no longer focus on healing. I focus on expansion. Because when we focus on expansion, healing is a natural byproduct. And how this process of expansion happens can be through the use of quantum technology, through the use of frequency medicine. Everything is energy in vibration. And sometimes when I feel low, I just lie down on what I call the vortex bed, and I use the vortex bed, which is basically a mat that enables electromagnetic frequencies to being pulsated through the mat, which raises the frequency of the body. And also crystals and gemstones are a precious part of my clinical work. And up until, and I must admit, I've always had an interest in gemstones, but I never really saw myself as somebody who basically puts crystals on people's bodies. So I have looked at, yes, Sue?
Ask you, I bet you somewhere sitting near you on the settee, because I've been in enough meetings with you, you're surrounded by, yeah, see, I knew he would be. Look at that. I'll just turn my mic off again and shut up.
That's a Celestine. It's the divine feminine, the energy of the divine feminine. I have got, this is my, oh my God, now my brain goes blank. 1 second. This is lapis lazuli. So working with lapis lazuli. So what I'm saying is gemstones, they are alive, and I never really believed it until I actually started to actively working with them. And I use them in precious forms where I place light that filters through gem cups like diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and I place them on the marma point of the body. It's some of the quantum healing work that I do. Parallel to that, one of my favorite pieces are these. And I think everybody nowadays really should have a piece of shungite in their house, in their home. Shungite is basically a meteoroid which is derived and come from Jupiter. Is about 50 million years old. And this is carbon, dense carbon molecules. And not only has it got a detoxifying effect, I have got the shungite pieces in my water, and I use the bioenergetic frequency unit to measure the energy of the water. And when I basically put shungite in the water compared to filtered water, it really amplifies the energy and the frequency of the water, makes it much more conducive to my system. So shungite, I've done a lot of experimenting by using shungite. Nice. I can see some shungite pieces there. There is the difference between normal shungite and elite shungite. If you get shungite, get the elite shungite. I know it's expensive, but that's what also protects you from electromagnetic fields. So shungite is known not only to clear from EMF, but also for protection. Whereas the normal shungite that you can buy, the cheaper version of it, basically clears it, but it doesn't protect. And I've done measurement. I've got a unit where I can measure my Wi-Fi frequencies in the house in my little flat here in central London. And I've got all my big shungite pieces around the Wi-Fi for protection. I also wear the shungite on a daily basis. So covered shungite, covered that, plant medicine. Well, that's a massive topic. It's really, I have never, and I'm really here being quite honest, I have never smoked in my life. I've never taken any drugs, any recreational drugs. But many years ago, when I was at a phase in my life where I really struggled to, where I really felt like my entire world was shaken, and I felt like if I don't deal with some of the stuff that I have been carrying with myself, then how can I be a good practitioner? How can I be a practitioner if I don't do the work myself? And I always go with my gut feeling, the way how I operate, the way I got into Ayurveda. People ask me all the time, how did you get into Ayurveda? I always say, I don't know, you know, sometimes you just know that this is what you need to do. And I always have come from the level of being true to myself and trying to do everything possible to be as honest, to be as truthful. And that's my approach that I take with my patients. I don't like my patients being dependent on me. It's about really creating their own sovereignty, being their own master. Basically, we can guide them as practitioners, but it is about self-empowerment rather than saying, and I always say that to people, look, if you expect to come to me and want a Vata Pitta Kapha diet, I'm the wrong person. I will not do that. But I can guide you towards finding the nutrition that actually suits you by supporting you on a more self-referral practice. Try to understand, increase your awareness, increase your frequencies. So you know when you take basil, when you use rosemary in the kitchen, when you take brahmi at nighttime, you will feel a difference rather than me telling you what to do. For Pitta people, as we know, they follow everything very easily, but the Vata mind, it just loses interest very quickly. So all of those practices, all of the stuff that I've done, the tantric work, and trust me, it has been very, very difficult and very, very challenging. And being able to openly show a vulnerable side of yourself and dealing with stuff that has been going on for thousands of years. For example, just to briefly mention, and then we will stop. So give me 1 minute, Sue. One of the challenging experiences that I had in the jungle was that through some of the plant medicine, and here I want to be very clear, it's not just ayahuasca. It is, ayahuasca is psychedelic, has got a psychedelic influence, and so has San Pedro. But most of my plants I've done in the jungle, dieted under the supervision of a shaman, and this is where my work has been very much influenced as well, is about exploring the herbs in the jungle as we have explored the Ayurvedic herbs many, many years ago by actually taking them internally. So I've been on diets in the jungle where you basically are on juices and you are being prepared this drink, for example, which could be a bark, it could be a root. And these again don't have any psychedelic effects, but you get to communicate with the spirit of the plant. And that energy sits in your body. And during the lockdown phase, because I couldn't go to Peru, I had some deep meditations, very, very deep insights into some of the practices that I've been asked to incorporate in my work as a healer and as an Ayurvedic practitioner. I would probably more likely say nowadays as an Ayurvedic healer, where I've been shown to diet, for example, with rose. So I had this meditation and I was sort of had this impulse, I need to get white rose and I need to prepare the medicine. And I cooked the medicine for about 2 weeks on the stove, really took the entire plant, the root, the stem, the flowers of the white rose. And then I went into a meditation retreat here in my flat. I've done a blackout retreat here in my flat where I completely darkened my space to experience a glimpse of what Ayurveda describes, or what has been described in the Vedic text as Kaya Kalpa, where you withdraw from all the senses. So trying to black out my flat, no exposure to light, no candles, no sound, like artificial sound, except the cars on the street. And I can tell you, it has brought up quite a lot of stuff and fears and anxiety. But the beautiful part of it is, and that journey I was being shown to take with oak. So in my meditations, I was given the impulse to work with oak, and I was asked that oak has to come from a particular place. And actually, the oak came from Hungary, from a volcanic area in Hungary, which in an area that has been apparently blessed by Dalai Lama. I didn't know that, but it so happened I got the oak from there. And in that meditation, in that time, I was shown to work with ashwagandha, with the root of ashwagandha, but taking it in a different way. So that means there's a different connection to the plant. There's a different connection to the essence that we take. And it is quite tough. It's really tough to sit in your own soup and to feel sorry for yourself. And in some of the visions that has come back 10,000 years ago, because for those who believe in reincarnation, it is a pattern that I have carried on an emotional level that has taken me back into an element, an fractal of energy of Thomaz today, 10,000 years ago, where I felt guilty about not being able to support and please my father. And that got dissolved in the jungle through the meditations. And I am concluding now because I'm aware of the time. I know Sue is going to ask me this question later, but I will repeat, I will just come back to this already now. If there's one thing that I want you to really get from today is we cannot be an authentic healer. We cannot be a true practitioner if we are not embarking on our own journey of clearing any emotional patterns that we carry, any belief systems that block us and stop us. And I feel a fraud if I try to tell to my patients, oh, go and maybe have some regression therapy or maybe do some counseling if I haven't dealt with my own issues. And what Sue has described as me changing, it is not so much about me changing. It's about just, I feel, coming closer and closer to a more authentic version of myself. And that has deepened my connection to my connection and my understanding that we are just energetic beings, that we are in essence light, and that we are fully that we have access to that light, and the light is all that is required for the body to change, for the mind to change. And I truly believe we move into a time where we will slowly move away from taking really physical pills and capsules, and where we move towards energetic remedies, where we move toward light medicines. And I'm working with gold potions, alchemical gold formulations, and all of those aspects, they feed back into Ayurveda. I never claim to practice traditional Ayurveda, but my life, my clinical practice has always been and will always be influenced by Ayurveda, because Ayurveda, the knowledge of life, the way I interpret it is life as it has been thousands of years ago is different from the life we live today. But it is about finding out what actually really works for us, finding out how can I become a better version of myself? How can I become more truthful towards myself? And that's what patients pick up. And it's not about thinking, and I'm totally guilty here. Oh my God, I can do this, and I've healed this, I've worked with this patient, I've done that, and it's all irrelevant. As soon as we step into our own space, in our own truth, we will get the information. We will get the knowing. I've never studied the work that I do purely from the level of the books. Knowledge is structured in consciousness. By tapping into consciousness, when I say consciousness means awareness, by connecting to awareness, we actually have access to that knowledge within us. So everything will be revealed. But in order for that to happen, I'm sorry to say, but we need to do the hard work. And it is hard work to really expose yourself to some of the areas that we may really like to keep under the carpet, to open Pandora's box and to work with it. But this is my approach. This has been my approach for over 30 years. So yes, a lot of things have shifted, but actually the way of how I always worked has never changed. And this is about focusing on expansion rather than focusing on healing, because by expansion, healing is a natural byproduct.
Okay, great answers. You don't need me here. We just have Thomas and then he can just carry on because Thomas, I'm going to change it round a bit to change the energy because I can see we got questions here and I think people would like to ask them. And then if we do the practical at the end, because we've just hit 7 o'clock, might give you a bit of a break where you listen to the questions. And then about 20 past, we'll go on to the practice or quicker if there's not many questions. So Colette, would you like to go for the first question, please, for Thomas?
Sorry. So we have a question from Julie Ulbrecht. She said it was a great explanation regarding positive thinking. And she's saying, do you think we can also get stuck in the dark and fail to see what's good as a result?
Yes, and that's very much true. That's what I'm trying to say, is that we actually get stuck into those patterns. So we get stuck, oh, I'm not grounded enough. We get stuck into believing that I have given my power away. We get stuck to believe that we are, oh, I need to cut the cord because I'm still energetically linked to this person or that person. But if you look at it, we can't cut the cord. It's all energy. It is energy that sits in the quantum field. It will have to be transformed. So it's not about separating from those energies. It's not about getting stuck in the pattern of thinking that holds me back. It is about how we can transform that, acknowledge it, see it, transform it, change it.
Great,
So
thank you.
we can get stuck in the dark, but that's why it's good to have a safety network. It's good to have people, especially when you feel a little bit emotionally or mentally wobbly, to have people that support you through the shadow work. And I can only say, working with Shungite, I put these Shungite pieces onto my energy centers. And that is a very gentle way of actually bringing some of the stuff to the surface and then gently leaving it, because it doesn't, this is where you clear it rather than being held back by it. Sorry.
Thanks, Thomas. Another question from Kay Britter. She's asking if you use the same process for the mind suffocation for the traumas of grief, for example, the loss of loved ones, especially when a person has experienced these several times in a fairly short space of time.
Yes, it is a very good initial process to really get them to acknowledge the grief without getting into the ping pong game. And that's the danger. So we look at grief as an emotion, and then we look at the attachment to grief. So we all have got our own interpretation of why we are grieving. We are grieving because of a loss of somebody in our life. And when we actually give in to the ping pong game, that grief, we feel, oh my God, I really missed that person. And we dive into that mental circuit, which actually anchors the grief. So it is about acknowledging the grief of as it is, but trying to get the mind not into the loop, trying to stop the mind from analyzing the ifs, buts, hows, and whys. Do you know what I mean by that? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think we're just going to go through the next one. Thomas is from Dr. Vijay Murthy, who you know well. He says, Thomas, how do you differentiate mental from emotional, and why can't it be mental constipation and emotional obesity? I'm trying to understand what is constipation and obesity, and I should have bought my glasses to read.
Okay. In theory, you could swap two things around. There's no issue with that. But the way I see it, it's an overload and our mind is so overly busy and so overly packed with information that needs to be processed. So it is like that weight that sits in our head, which dullens and dampens our ability to perceive, our ability to go through day-to-day's working. So by dealing with the weight on the mind, we lift that weight, which will open up our mind to actually then see more likely what are the emotions underlying that actually contribute to me constantly needing to be in this overstimulation. So in theory, we could swap it around, but it's logical to me because of the weight that we carry mentally and emotionally constipated. I mean, it's clear. Look at our world, how it has changed in the last 12 months. We are not able to hug anybody. We are not allowed to socialize, to be with people. And all of that is another traumatic element. So we are not able to express those who live by themselves, who may not be able to have any physical contact, any contact of touch or intimacy. And you know yourself, Dr. Vijay, how important touch is. So that leads to a blocked way of emotions. People are scared, and you can see that everywhere, especially now when I walk out in London. Oh my God, don't touch me, don't come too close to me. So all of that is what I believe, and that's what I said at the very beginning. That's the true pandemic, is to deal with emotional constipation and to deal with mental obesity at this particular point in time in particular.
Okay, we've got a question from Tina. Tina, if you're there, I know that you're part of the communications team. We're struggling to understand it. Maybe you could ask Thomaz directly. If you turn your mic on and do that, please. I think you'll explain it better than Colette or I will.
Okay, if there is tension in the head and you can feel the tension is directly linked to an area in the sacral area, so there's a definite like attachment between what's going on, and at times that you can feel like a very heightened orgasmic feeling, and it's not like a sexual experience as such, but it's like a mind-blowing experience that could happen.
Yeah.
Can you explain anything about that, Thomas? Does that actually talk about, does that actually relate to what you're saying about the creative energy, actually just us coming into a spiritual union with ourselves?
Exactly. And breath work is one of the there are some very powerful tantric breath work practices, very simple, that one can do to actually shift that energy. The reason why the tension is there, because it's like a blocked pipe, it doesn't flow. So, and then, I don't know, there could be very much underlying, again, your perception about this energy and the idea, or maybe the belief, that it is wrong to actually express that energy, that is wrong to work with that energy. So that will then, in addition, cause pressure to the mind, which continues, feeds into the energy being just stuck in the sacral area. So like I said, there are some breathing practices that I use with patients, or with some people, especially those who come for some tantric work, for some deeper work with breath work, that can actually shift that. So for now, my advice would just simply be is just to bring your awareness by slowing down your breath into the sacral area, and bring that energy from the sacral area up to your heart and allow it to flow out through your heart. So rather than thinking you need to dissolve it in the head, it needs to go up here. That's what I'm saying when I spoke about the chakras, how they can actually hold us back in the density of the energetic body, which is basically the auric field, the energy field that spans from hand to hand. So use your breath, bring it up through the heart, and let it out. So it's basically breathing in, and breathing it out, and just close your eyes, and it's enough, because energy follows thought. So wherever our thought goes, don't try to make it perfect. It's just enough the intention that you bring the energy up, you breathe it out through the heart, which basically starts to clear the channels naturally without going to, oh, why is my energy stuck in the root chakra? Or maybe I have had this abuse or that going on. This is all important. I'm not saying it's not important, but the danger is we get into the ping pong game. That means our mind starts to race with the issue, with the if, buts, hows, and whys. And this is what prevents us, what stops us from actually dissolving it. I hope this answers your question, Tina.
It did. Thank you so much, Thomas.
Hey, Thomas, we're getting questions. Moira Forsyth has asked, does physics also show there is energy in crystals? That's point one. How do you prove to clients that they are powerful? And while we're on crystals, we are getting asked, and maybe you could give us some links for this afterwards. We are getting asked about shungite. Where should you get it from? Where is it available from? So we are getting asked about different crystals. So that's something for you to think about as well. So you okay with that one?
Yes, let me just answer the question. So the first one was about physics, basically literally.
Does physics also show that there is energy in crystals? That's point one.
Yes, so coming back to shungite, and I am not 100% confident in explaining exactly the physics, and I'm quite honest about it. But what you look at is, we look at the carbon structure of the shungite. So basically, this shungite looks quite heavy, but it is actually very light. So it is the way of how the stone is formed, and this has gone back into science, basically astrophysics, who understood the chemical makeup of the shungite. It has got so-called carbon molecules that are aligned like a net, and they form the Faraday shield. So that basically protects from the energetic fields to prevent them to entering our physical body, especially when you wear the stone on yourself. So there are aspects from science, in particular, I know for shungite, where they have gone into deeper understanding of the molecular structure of shungite. Why does it work as a shield for preventing EMF from affecting us? So yes, there are. Stones have consciousness, but they have to be, this sounds silly, they have to be activated, they have to be spoken to, they have to be held. I have had crystals lying around for a very long time, and it's only through the lockdown phase that I've really sort of somehow magically manifested all those pieces. This is one of the selenite crystals. I have got this little dragon, which is made of turquoise. And these energies, basically, you have to hold them. You have to create a relationship with them. And the best thing is people will experience it. And I have people coming here that get some treatments. I give them always 2 chunks of the shungite in their hands. And within a short period of time, they are really understanding how busy their mind is. It's almost like they go into a witness position of how busy the mind is, becoming aware of it. So it is mainly through experience that you can convince your patients to look at them. But also, if you look at, our body is a crystalline structure. The essence of our body is made out of crystals. So naturally, there is a resonance between the crystals that we carry, that we work with, and our physical body, going back to the knowledge of Emoto and how thoughts and the environment changes the molecular structure of the water. So long-winded answer to the question. The essence that I'm saying here is, yes, crystals are alive, they have got consciousness, but it's like a child, it needs to be nurtured. You need to work with them. It's almost, and this sounds, each of the crystals has got its own spirits, has got its own energy. And when I did this course over the time of the lockdown, to work with an energetic healer, to be really go into the energetics of the crystals and how to connect with the spirits of the crystals, the energies of the crystals, I really started to realize they are actually alive. And but it's like with anything, if you have got them neglected somewhere in the corner, it's like you have got all those beautiful deities standing around on your altar, and you don't polish them, you don't clean them. And those who are steeped in the Vedic tradition and the Hindu tradition, you will agree with me that actually the energy of the deity gets activated when you pray to the deity, when you hold it in your hand, when you wash them, when you basically work with them. And that's the same thing with the energy of the crystals.
Okay, Thomas, great answers. Thank you very much. Colette and I are just piling through. I think the biggest thing you're going to have to let people know afterwards is where to maybe get some crystals. Thank you, Dr. Vijay, because I see you've been putting lots of answers to people with reference to their questions on there. So if we would like to do the demonstration that you were going to be, and everyone join in, it's 20 past now, so we would have to go for it because we're ending at 7:30.
Okay. I mean, this sounds more dramatic than it actually is. It's very simple. It's really simple. So I like us all. I know I've been talking a lot and my mind is now definitely running in overdrive and definitely a little bit mentally obese. But I like us all to just take a couple of seconds to close your eyes. Take a few deep breaths in and slowly breathe out. So breathe in and slowly breathe out. As you breathe out, you feel you settle into the chair, into the sofa, wherever you sit. Just become aware of your physical body. You may feel some aches and pains. You may feel restless. You may feel lots of questions in your head. Just observe those questions. Observe the busyness. Get your awareness into your physical body. And then I would like to invite you to just go and think about a situation that may have been happening today, yesterday, in the very near of the now, where you felt in any shape or form upset. It could be anxious. Maybe there was an event that you have been able or have been asked to do. You felt anxious, or maybe somebody said something and you felt frustrated. You felt upset. So I'd like you to just connect to that knowing for a couple of seconds. And just to get an idea, keep your eyes closed, but I just like you to raise your hand if you have found a link to any of these situations. Just raise your hand. So give me an idea. So maybe we wait a little bit longer. Just connect to that energy, connect to that frequency. Any emotion that you feel has upset you, has led to throw you out of balance. Anxiety, fear, depression, anger. Depression, one side, sadness maybe only, frustration. Okay. Sit with that experience. Thank you for the hands. Sit with that experience. And I'd like you in your mind to repeat the following. I, ... say your name. So really talk to yourself. I, Thomaz, observe myself feeling frustrated. And then you take a deep breath in, you count for 4, 3, 4, you hold to your breath briefly and you count out for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again repeat, I, Thomaz, observe myself feeling frustrated. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 6. You will notice that your mind wants to race off. Your mind wants to go into the ifs, buts, hows, and whys, I should and shouldn'ts. The breath work will keep you focused on just a simple task, acknowledging how that situation has made you feel. And use your breath again. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 6. Just repeat that in your own time, in silence, for a few rounds. Important is to elongate your out breath, because when we breathe out longer than we breathe in, our mind goes from sympathetic mode, from fight and flight, into rest and digest. So we create space for to transform that emotion, that feeling. And then slowly, just open your eyes when you're ready. Can I get a hands up briefly? I know this is a bit rushed and there's many people on the screen. Can I get a hands up who felt that something has shifted with regards to the feeling that you had? Hands up. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I mean. We create space. And that's a technique that you can use even in the kitchen when you chop your vegetables. You don't necessarily need to sit down with closed eyes. You sit there, you observe yourself, become aware of how you feel, catch yourself, stop the ping pong game, stop the mind from trying to go into ifs, buts, hows, and whys. Create the space, acknowledge the feeling, and that will create the environment for things to shift and change. It's a very effective, a very simple technique. It's very, it's something that you can use even on a daily basis without you needing to sit down with closed eyes. So that's step 1 of the OBC technique. O stands for observed. B for create. Sorry, O, B stands for being, and then C stands for creating or creation. Step 1, O, observe how you feel, acknowledge how you feel.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad we all had time to practice something. I think we're still getting questions about crystals. So if we're going to end on 7:30, we can't answer them. If anybody wants to stay on a bit longer, we can ask them. But at the end, Caroline is going to put a poll up. So if we could actually answer the poll, it just helps us at the APA to decide, you know, should we do this going forward? You know, have we got the right tone, the right speakers? Is it too long? Everything like that. So it does take quite a lot of effort from the team to try and put this together. We do appreciate your time being here, but we want to make sure that everything we're doing is going in the right direction. So if you want me to ask more questions and we've got more time, Carolina, give me the thumbs up if we're allowed to go past 7:30 or not. Okay, so we are. If you would like me to ask more questions.
Sue,
yeah.
My crystal has spoken to me and said, why didn't you mention my name? It's a Labradorite. I had a blank. So Labradorite has spoken and said, I want to be named as well. Here we go.
Okay, well, You know, crystals are the most questions, really. I don't really know why we're getting so many on the crystals or the gemstones. If you'd like me to ask you, Dr. Ricef has said, when you say crystals have consciousness, I can't make my mind up that what is the difference between a living and a non-living body? Could you please clarify this? Thank you.
I have answered that in a comment.
Okay, right. See, I told you I needed my glasses, so we seem to be okay. If there's no more questions, we can go to the poll, but I would, while the poll comes on screen, it just takes up the whole screen, but we can still talk to you. I'd like to thank Thomas for this evening. I'm sure you'll agree with me, is a fascinating talk and a different perspective. And that's what we're trying to offer you here, something different. So thank you, Thomas, for being so honest, talking about your book and your journey and how you're still exploring and expanding. So that's fantastic. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight and joining us. Thomas, is there anything you want to say to end?
No, just really the key message is don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to show your vulnerability, because vulnerability means honesty, means truth, and people will pick it up. And this is what can contribute to people's journey of transformation, to people's journey of healing, to people's journey of understanding their own body, their own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic body. So it's us, because we are a reflection of that energy, especially when we work with patients, when we deal with patients. And don't be afraid to show your vulnerability. And like I said, it's no more, for me at least, it's no more about healing, it's about expansion. We are moving, or we have moved into the so-called age of Aquarius. And I remember when I was in the ashram, Maharishi was talking about creating the bubble of Sat Yoga within Kali Yoga. So what we are, from my perspective, the way I see it is we have created the energy, the cosmic energy is like Sat Yoga, the time, the phase where there is truth coming to the surface, and honesty. And it's about really expansion. It's about getting in touch with your light body, getting in touch with your energetic body, and start to perhaps look at life beyond that, what we can see with our physical senses. Radio waves are real, microwaves are real, even though we don't see them with the physical eye. In the same way, it's our energy, the way we radiate, what we radiate out, that has an impact on the people that we meet, that has a healing effect on the people that we meet on the streets. It doesn't necessarily mean on a professional basis. So
okay, that's very good and very honest, and thank you again for everyone to coming. Thank you especially to Thomas, and you know, we look forward to seeing you with the next webinar, and the newsletter's due out soon, so look out for the APA newsletter and look on the APA site as well, because we're always adding interesting things there. The recordings will be available afterwards. You need to contact the office for those, but there will be a small charge for that as well. So I think, have I done all the housekeeping? Colette, Carolina, anything else I should be doing? Thomas, you're part of the team as well. So
thank you so much for allowing me to.
everybody, and thank you for all being with us this evening.